This is the biggest need that the Montreal Canadiens have, and it's getting overlooked by an overwhelming majority of the fan base. They can score a lot of goals. The Eastern Conference is wide open. Now, I don't think their Stanley Cup window is quite open yet, and they're not simply one piece away. But adding this particular player or this profile of player will help them make some noise in the playoffs, maybe win a round or two, and maybe even represent the Eastern Conference in the Stanley Cup final. So we'll have that and much more coming up next on the inaugural episode of Answer the Call with Peter Vryonis. Welcome in, everybody, to Answer the Call. This is a brand new sports podcast that I am starting where we're going to tackle all things baseball, basketball, football, but today we are talking about hockey and specifically the Montreal Canadiens, who are making some noise in the Eastern Conference, currently occupying a wild card spot. But that does not mean that they can't make some noise come playoff time. So there's a few names that I want to circle here that I definitely have my eye on, that I know the Montreal Canadiens have checked in on at least one of these guys, according to sources. But is it realistic to go out there and not necessarily mortgage the future, but try your best to acquire this profile of player in order to strengthen your team and strengthen your lineup for what hopes to be a deep playoff run? But let's start with a couple of names. And the first one that I want to throw out there is Radko Gudas. Now, you see him in the thumbnail, and I don't think the Anaheim Ducks, who are having a pretty surprising season, are going to be quick to trade away their captain. That's not what I'm saying. But a Radko Gudas-like player is exactly what the Montreal Canadiens need, in my opinion. Now, you can argue that you'd want to go more mobile, and we've seen a stay-at-home defenseman who's not necessarily the fleetest of foot get exposed come playoff time, but I think the Canadiens have an abundance of puck movers and an abundance of great skaters on their blue line core. So that's why I think you need a little bit more sandpaper, a little bit more rugged and toughness, and Radko Gudas brings exactly that. The numbers aren't eye-popping, but they don't have to be. This is a guy who plays a physical brand of hockey, who can log a lot of minutes, and someone that I know Martin St. Louis will grow to trust as soon as he steps in with a Montreal Canadiens uniform. Now, again, let me preface it by saying I don't think Radko Gudas is available, and I don't know if the Canadiens are in the market to overpay for that right-hand shot defenseman who can shut a game down and make it ugly. But Radko Gudas in the core, what he brings to the table is exactly what the Montreal Canadiens need. It's not a number two center at the moment. It's not a top-line winger with Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. It is a shutdown defenseman who can log big minutes, and that is something that the Habs have struggled with pretty much all season long. They have some great pieces on that blue line, like I alluded to earlier in the video, but they struggle to close out games, and the overwhelming majority of the fan base is clamoring for Arbor Xhekaj to get more minutes and for him to be fully immersed into the plans of Martin St. Louis. But I don't think that's a realistic option at this point. We've seen him time and time again be under that 10-minute threshold, and there's just no trust there from Stefan Robida and the rest of the coaching staff. So I think we got to take Arbor Xhekaj out of this equation. I think we got to take Jaden Struble out of this equation, because at the end of the day, I believe they are extra defensemen, seventh D-men on good competing NHL teams. So Radko Gudas is one name that I want to throw out there. The next name is Colton Parayko, the St. Louis Blue, who we saw play for Team Canada at the Olympics and didn't do all that great, but he was instrumental in the Four Nations. He's still a pretty steady defenseman. Now, the only issue with Colton Parayko is this. He's 32 years old. He's not exactly the greatest skater in the world. And he's got 4 more years after this one at a $6.5 million cap hit. So acquiring Colton Parayko, you would have to go through a lot of financial hurdles in order for that to work. and you would probably have to part ways with one of your A or B list prospects. And this tweet here from Rise to the Ashes, from Rise from the Ashes, sorry, is mentioning David Reinbacher as one of those pieces. Now, I don't know if I would go that far to acquire a player who seems to be on the decline in Colton Parayko, but again, this fits the mold of what the Montreal Canadiens need at the back end. It's a guy who can steady that core a little bit, who can add to what Caden Gooley brings to the table, because I love Gooley, but I don't know if you could rely on him to stay healthy come playoff time and be one of your valuable contributors playing big minutes when he's so injury prone. The book's still not out on him yet. I'm not ready to shut the door on Caden Gooley just yet, but you got to plan for these contingencies, and I think keeping that in mind, the injury history, you might need to add another stay-at-home defenseman in order to give yourself a chance to compete. I said it at the start of the video. I don't think this is the right time for the Canadiens to mortgage their future and try to get some of these assets that may not be part of the bigger picture. But Colton Parayko, a right-hand shot defenseman who's big, who can play a physical style, that is what they need. And the last name that I'm going to throw out at you guys there is Rasmus Ristolainen. Now, I mentioned Caden Cooley's injury history. Ristolainen is not all that much better, not having played a full season in the 5 years that I'm showing here. And I showed the 5-year sample size for Ristolainen. I showed it for Colton Parayko right there. Who is as steady as ever, and then Radko Gudas as well, who is pretty steady. But Ristolainen has been the one that has been mentioned to be readily available. Now, I think Parayko will be as well, but as I mentioned with the contract, a little bit more difficult to make that trade work out. So Ristolainen, probably the most realistic names of the ones that I'm showing right there. But what they all have in common is that they can log big minutes. You see 20 minutes a night for Ristolainen. You see 22 minutes a night for Colton Parayko, and a pretty large sample size of him being a heavily used defenseman in that St. Louis system. And then for Radko Gudas, the ice time has been trending downwards, but with Caden Gooley in the mix in that top four on the blue line, I don't think you need to acquire a top four D-man. I think a Gudis type player who can log 15, 16, 17 minutes is exactly what they need. Carrier has been playing a few too many minutes for my liking, and there are guys that may just not be in the right spots, and it takes a lot of playing time and responsibility off the plate of Mike Matheson, which I think will benefit him. He's still going to kill penalties. He's still going to be a valuable player for your team. But allowing another similar type player to Matheson come in and do the dirty work and share that load, I think that helps you if you're the Montreal Canadiens. So again, I don't think this is the right time for them to mortgage their future and for them to make any rash moves to try to win 1 or 2 playoff rounds. But the Eastern Conference landscape is wide open. And apart from Tampa Bay, I don't think there's that elite team that really stands out. So if you can make a move to shore up your blue line or even add a little bit more goal scoring, do anything at this point. If you're the Habs, I think you're in a pretty good spot to compete with those guys. And you might not think so over the course of a 7-game series, and I might even be spin zoning this as a Montreal Canadiens fan myself. But I really don't see that team that stands out in the East, apart from Tampa Bay. What sucks is that they're in your division, and you might have to play them in the second round if you get past the first. So that is where things get tricky, and that is where management might hesitate to actually pull the trigger on one of those moves. But let me know in the comments down below what you guys think about some of those names. I mean, I mentioned Colton Parayko, who has another 4 years left after this one. Marco D'Amico, who indicated that the Canadiens just simply checked in on the price of Rasmus Ristolainen. Nothing more came from that very brief exchange. The Dallas Stars seem like a more serious option, and the Stars are primed for a deep playoff run. Again, they have to get over that hurdle of Colorado, similar to what a lot of teams in the East are going to have to get over with Tampa Bay. So that's a real tall task whether you're Dallas, whether you're Minnesota, but it makes sense for those teams to beef up because their Stanley Cup window is wide open. I don't think that's the case for the Montreal Canadiens, but there is something to be said about getting that playoff experience and allowing yourself to grow, to allow this nucleus to experience more playoff atmospheres and more playoff style intensity games. I think you'll only benefit from that in the long term. So let me know in the comments down below what you think about those three names. Gudas, Ristolainen, and Parayko. Those are the three that I brought up. I don't know if any of them are necessarily realistic, but what I do know is that all the talk about a number two centerman, all the talk about a top line winger to play with Caulfield and Suzuki, that's great, and I think that's going to come with time. But the biggest need at the moment for the Montreal Canadiens to succeed in the postseason and to make some noise and to be one of the last teams standing, you need a right-hand shot defenseman or a guy that can just simply play that shutdown game. We saw the letdown when the Islanders pulled Ilya Sorokin the other night, and Patrick Roy was very, very aggressive with his pulling of the goaltenders. We know that much, but they scored 6-on-5, and it seems to be a reoccurring issue for the Canadiens as the season goes along, whether it's the penalty kill, whether it is 6-on-5, or whether they're just flat out trying to protect the lead. It's not something that they're good at. And you can attribute that to being a young team, an inexperienced team that hasn't won much of anything. But how do you get better? I think you bring in veteran players and you allow them to immerse themselves into the group. I think that's the best way to go about it, but I'm not about mortgaging the future either. So I trust Kent Hughes, I trust Jeff Gordon to make the right moves and to put this team in a position to succeed, but I also don't think that they're going to make any rash decisions and moves that will cripple the future of the Canadiens. The future is very bright. That much has been documented with all their top prospects and all their young nucleus in place. So I don't think they're going to deal from that position of strength, but it remains to be seen because the deadline is just a couple of games away for all teams. So we should expect a lot of movement. But let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this inaugural episode of Answer the Call as well. I appreciate all your support. Feel free to leave any video suggestions in the comment section down below. I know we got the World Baseball Classic coming up, which I'm going to be locked in on. Baseball spring training. I'm a baseball guy through and through. NFL offseason. The draft is upcoming. Approaching, I should say. Fernando Mendoza expected to go first overall. So a lot of things shaking up in the National Football League. A lot of movement going on in the NBA as well with some big-time storylines there. So keep it locked here on Answer the Call with Peter Vryonis, and I will keep you up to date on everything that you need to know about the North American pro sports scene. I will see you all in the next video.